Hello, welcome all to our July hot topic, which is not our usual third Thursday, but we wanted to have it before the vote on August 2nd. So today we're very grateful that Representative Christina Haswood is joining us, Kansas House District 10, and Senator Marci Francisco. Thank you so much for giving your time today to talk with us about your perspectives on the August 2nd election that's coming up. Senator Francisco was first elected to the Kansas Senate in 2004, where she has served on very, very important committees working for Kansans. Christina Haswood's background in public health certainly makes her qualified to speak to the ramifications of this August 2nd proposed constitutional amendment. So with that, I'm going to let Senator Francisco and Representative Haswood take it away.
So Representative Haswood, is it all right if I get started with some background that happened before you got to the legislature?
Yes, that'd be appreciated.
Okay, so the Kansas legislature actually has and does regulate abortion. Some of those proposals seem reasonable. We probably don't need this quite yet.
Oh, okay. I'll stop sharing that.
Yeah, some of those proposals seem reasonable. Others are very questionable. And one that the Supreme Court ruled was unconstitutional in 2011 was a bill that required special rules for abortion clinics that did not apply to other medical clinics. So, it was talking about how wide the hallways should be, what the temperatures needed to be. And clearly those regulations were being imposed to make it more difficult for clinics to operate. And there really was not a reason that an abortion clinic had to have different standards than are applied to other medical procedures. So the court struck that down and life went on. But in 2015, there was another regulation that passed that said a woman in the second trimester of a pregnancy could not have a D&E procedure for an abortion, dilation and extraction. The proponents of this legislation said this was dismemberment. The two obstetricians that filed a case against this argued that Kansas was still allowing second trimester abortions. They were only restricting the safest method for such an abortion. So this sparked the ruling by the Supreme Court that indeed the Kansas Constitution gave bodily autonomy to women, including the right to an abortion. The pro-life movement described this as a discovery and a new right. I believe that it was simply recognizing the right that exists in our Constitution. And when I talk to people, I mention that this is not a change to the Constitution. This is a change to the Bill of Rights. So these are the fundamental rights that we have secured. And it's important I believe that those rights be secured without being subject to rule of a majority. These are really rights that protect a minority. So anyway, the court reprimanded the decision back to the lower court. And they described this not as an absolute right, but as a fundamental right. So they didn't say that the state does not have the ability to regulate abortion. They only said that they can't regulate abortion unless there's a compelling state interest. That could be that parents should be involved. That could be, some standards for healthcare, but also that such regulation is narrowly tailored to further that interest. So, unfortunately, the response was to have this amendment that would change that Bill of Rights and say that we don't have that right. So I'm going to let Representative Haswood make some comments, and we can talk later about the specific wording about what's on the ballot.
Thank you, Senator Francisco. So I came in this was my first term, and right at the gate, they pushed through this abortion amendment to the point where they even packed, on the House side is Fed and State Committee, which this amendment was first popped up on. They packed that committee with very conservative Republicans to the point where the next year, they took a lot of them off, so they didn't need them. And it was obviously top priority agenda, I'd say for both sides of the aisle. You heard representatives say, I ran to defend this pro-life movement, and then you have folks like me who ran to defend our constitutional right to this bodily autonomy and abortion rights. So it was really, I guess, a big welcoming into the Kansas legislature for me as a freshman. And it was just crazy just to see how all this went down, and then to see, how Senator Francisco just told the history, and just how long this movement, it's folks are saying it started when Roe v. Wade became law. And just to see this kind of come into this big tidal wave into Kansas. And yeah, so we all fortunately did not have enough votes to stop this abortion amendment. And then now we are all trying to advocate as much as we can. I think one of the biggest barriers is that the legislature passed a lot of voter suppression laws to aid in the efforts.
I can't hear this.
Uh-oh.
Can everybody else hear it?
Yeah. You might have to turn your volume up. And I think that's been one of our biggest barriers. I have a summer internship with 5 excellent college students. And, last year one of our biggest things was volunteering with the League of Women Voters on voter registration. And I think y'all know more than most that to vote is such a key part of this, and just being out there and educating folks. And now with the one of the bills passed where if you are perceived as an election official, you can risk a felony. It's such a big risk. And that's something that, I'm not comfortable with my team going out to do. So it's been challenging, but I appreciate everyone's efforts thus far for August 2nd.
So the other thing that I would like to focus on, and I think would be important to the league, would be actually the wording that's going to be on the ballot. It just states, because Kansans value both women and children, the Constitution of the state of Kansas does not require government funding of abortion and does not create or secure a right to abortion. To the extent permitted by the Constitution of the United States, which we understand has been changed recently in terms of the ruling on Roe versus Wade, the people, through their elected representatives and state senators, may pass laws regarding abortion, including, but not limited to, in circumstances of pregnancy resulting from rape or incest, or when necessary to save the life of the mother. So this is really kind of, in some ways, confusing wording, because it almost says you could consider those instances resulting from rape and incest, but it allows you to make laws regardless of rape, incest, or when necessary to save the life of the mother. And Denise, this might be a good time to put up the slide. One of the awkward things about how we produce these kinds of resolutions and offer is, and it makes sense that the bill that allows for the amendment to be on the ballot also includes a statement of the explanatory statements. This is what a yes vote would mean. This is what a no vote would mean. But those statements are written by the people who are carrying the concurrent resolution. So
Do you want me to put up the ballot language itself?
sure, we can do that.
I did pull that up.
Okay.
So here's where we've got what the ballot looks like from the Secretary of State office.
So I'm particularly want to look at a vote against the value of them both, which is,
Okay. Let's scroll up there.
so this says the amendment would make no changes to the Constitution and could restrict the people through their elected state legislators from regulating abortion by leaving in place the recently recognized right to abortion. And so I changed the wording to say, unless there is a compelling state interest and that the regulation is narrowly tailored to further that interest. So it's not clear that, people and the legislators can still regulate abortion. It's just that the courts would have some oversight. And we are well aware of 2 cases in which that oversight was very important to people and made a lot of sense. So the court has not stepped in on many of the regulations we have about abortion, but it did when people were trying to make the clinics have very separate and more restrictive regulations. And then again, in the case when the legislature said the safest method for women would not be allowed. So we should probably open up the conversation and see what questions people have about this issue.
Did you want to talk about this was what you were just talking about, though, your motion?
So yes, I did make the motion to strike that they couldn't regulate abortion in many circumstances, to add unless there's a compelling state interest and such regulation is narrowly tailored to further that interest. And I think that's an important part of what I would like people to know when they're voting on this. Otherwise, if you go back to voting no, it sounds like the people have no opportunity acting through their legislators for regulations. And I think that's what the group who's supporting the amendment is trying to indicate.
Mhm.
Sean?
As Carol Williamson pointed out to me several weeks ago, what's actually going on here is that the Kansas State Legislature is trying to, what's the word I want? Take all of the power away from, only keep the power only for itself, and take the power away from the Kansas State Supreme Court and from the governor and the executive offices. What is your feeling about that? Is that, what are some other indications that that's what the Kansas State Legislature is working on right now? And plans for now in the future as well.
So I would agree that this amendment is clearly taking the power from the courts. It does not necessarily take the power from the government, from the governor, because it's also interesting to note, when we pass this resolution, nothing will change about how abortion is regulated in Kansas.
In the immediate.
But starting January,
Sure.
what is it? 11, I haven't looked at the calendar yet.
2023.
What?
Starting
Yeah,
in
in January,
2023.
the second Monday in
Yeah.
January,
Boom.
there's very likely to be bills already filed
Yep.
to say how we might restrict. If those bills are passed, the governor will still have an opportunity to veto those bills. So this amendment doesn't take power from the governor in that sense. But once the bill is passed, and someone wants to say, well, we don't think this is constitutional, their argument is severely limited because of the change to that Bill of Rights to say abortion is not necessarily a right, or bodily autonomy. I think, the change, it talks about abortion, but we're saying people don't have that right. And I think the most amusing thing to me in this discussion is those people who are arguing that women should not have bodily autonomy are the ones who are saying, you shouldn't be able to tell me that I have to wear a mask. And you shouldn't be able to tell me that I have to take a vaccination. And you shouldn't even be able to say whether or not I've had a vaccination should limit my ability to go anywhere or participate in any activities that I'd like. So these are people who are clearly protecting their bodily autonomy. And I agree. I have had the vaccinations and I've had the boosters. I don't want to say to someone else that they have to have that. But in the same way, I don't think we should say to women, we're going to restrict your choice.
And I think we also saw some pieces of legislation of criminalization already introduced in the legislature. So they're already showing their cards. I think I haven't seen anything specific, but I'm sure they're working up things of, specific, just all right bans or specific weeks or on contraception. I think talks of birth control and IUD and fertility clinics and those services are really kind of what's on my mind right now, of how far are they going to go, how far are they going to take this with the next legislative session. And then I go through like waves of angerment and my biggest wave right now is that there's nothing for men. They're like part of the equation to all this. So that's just something I'm like, ugh.
Carol.
Hi, Carol Williamson. And Senator and Representative, thank you for being with us. Thank you for your work every day. Thank you for being women leaders. Now to this discussion. Jen's and my conversation was about all three amendments, because one of the amendments in November does usurp executive power. But back to my question here. Yeah, back to my question here. I so appreciate you showing the language of the amendment. I think it's very important that people see that before they go in to vote. So I think that as we message, as we do voter education, since we're within the last 4 weeks, I think that's the most important thing that we can do when we're face to face with people. What is to show that language of the amendment and to explain what it doesn't mean. What advice would you give to us in voter education for the last 4 weeks, Senator and Representative?
So I think I'd emphasize that this is a change to the Bill of Rights. And, I don't know how to point to misinformation. The Kansas City Star, when this first came out, did a good job of saying, here are the regulations about abortion in Kansas. You can't get an abortion if it's after 22 weeks. People talk about fetal pain, but the Academy of Gynecologists and Obstetricians, or obstetricians and gynecologists, whichever way they have it, say that probably that perception does not exist before 24 weeks. They're saying there would be no opportunity to regulate abortion at all. It could happen up until the time of birth. But that's not the case in Kansas and would not be the case in Kansas. Representative Haswood?
I guess just some of my talking points, and again, I kind of go through waves of frustrations, and mine's just the statistical maternal and child mortality and morbidities, especially being Indigenous and coming from a very historically disenfranchised community, where even our prenatal care rates are just extremely low. I've talked to a midwife, and she said that there's been several suicides in the past year, just for the hopelessness during these pregnancies. And and depending on your audience too, LGBTQ plus trans folks will be disenfranchised about this as well. I usually talk to the young folks. I feel like when I was in college and participating in activities, it would always be the male who would be like, oh, if anything happened, you can always get an abortion. Like it was always kind of that thought and that safety net. But I think the statistics and just pointing out the fact that the social service programs that we have too currently in place, especially the foster care system, is definitely not somewhere we want to avoid that at all cost for a child to go into the Kansas foster care system. It's a broken system, and there's just been so much already need to be fixed by that. And then efforts in the legislature for expanding like SNAP and WIC is not met with compassion. And then I saw a couple weeks ago that Senator Marshall was making comments about withholding a vote for school lunches for children because he thought it was going to go to trans children. And I just cannot wrap my head around that. We don't have a system in place for this increase of population. And looking at my communities in the Indigenous community, especially folks like us who use Indian health service systems, there has been a narrative going around about abortion clinics being on tribal lands, and I think that is quite an ignorant thought. And no worries if that was your thought too, because a lot of people are not really educated on the systems. There's actually something called the Hyde Amendment at the federal level, where you cannot use federal funding to get an abortion, but except for the cases of if the mother's life is at risk. So we've already had no right to an abortion through the healthcare systems that we have, and that's just alarming, especially when I represent House District 10, which has Haskell Nations University in it, with a large urban Native population that we utilize a lot of just regular healthcare services. It's going to continue to increase all these morbidities and potential risk for mortalities and mental health. It's just what I'm seeing.
Thank you.
So what are the arguments that people are making to say, I mean, that others have heard about why this amendment should be passed? I mean, what
Well,
are the
more,
arguments?
this is Carol again, more misinformation saying that we have an increase in painful dismemberment abortions, which is a misquoting of the statistics at KDHE.
And I think the Kansas City Star article pointed that out, that,
Mhm.
you know, again, because Kansas does not allow them, there are not significantly more late-term abortions in Kansas than there had been. That when George Tiller was practicing, he was probably one of the best gynecologists for late-term abortions. I always like to remind people he was also one of the individuals that probably arranged for adoptions in Kansas. So he was very valuable to some families that I knew who were able to adopt because he knew those cases where there was a fetal abnormality or where there was the life of a mother, but if the fetus was viable, adoption was something that he helped arrange for. Seal, I see you have your hand up.
Right. I'm hearing a lot of, well, life begins at conception and it's already a person and you shouldn't kill any person, including, 6-week-old embryo or fetus, and that all rights should be given to anything, any concepted egg, and that there should be a law that if somebody kills a pregnant person, no matter the duration of the pregnancy, that it should be a double homicide, and such as that.
There are some laws about, and I don't know if they're in Kansas, and I should know that, there are laws that if you injure a woman who is carrying a fetus, that the fines are, or the procedure penalties are increased. This is different in different religions. And so we are not respecting other views about when life begins. And life does not begin without help before birth or even at birth, right? So we are asking these women and their families to take on increasing responsibilities if there are fetal abnormalities. We need to understand that the majority of women, is it probably 60%, who get an abortion already have children. So that kind of contradicts the argument that this is just kids at their prom, on prom night, not paying attention. And the other thing I would argue is it really okay to deny health care to the mothers who need their lives to help their other children? So what is it, the ectopic pregnancies? So we are not helping those. We are making it much more difficult for healthcare providers to understand what the rules are. And changing the future for children. There was that study in New York City in 1990s that the only link that they could make to the reduction in crime in New York City was to the passage of Roe versus Wade 20 years earlier. Because an unwanted child is more likely, as Representative Haswood pointed out, to end up in foster care. And that's not a good road to have to go down. They're more likely to be a juvenile delinquent or be incarcerated. So how are we helping? And what services does Kansas now have to take care of additional children? I mean, we cannot handle the foster care list that we have now. Why would we want, why do we think we can add to it? And I'm sorry, there isn't a signature on the ballot to say, because I voted for this, I will accept the responsibility for taking care of a child.
Right. And Kansas did pass in 2013, I believe, under Brownback, a statute that says life begins at conception.
I'd agree with Senator Francisco. As a legislator, I don't feel comfortable making that law that this is going to be where life starts. Who am I to say and
Oh.
speak all for religions and I mean, look at science and all that. It's just something that I can't pinpoint, and that's wherever my personal belief is probably not someone else's personal belief. Yeah, so I agree. That's definitely concerning. And I've seen the TV ads too. They're really honing in on this late term abortion dismemberment, which is one of the rare abortions, and studies have shown it's usually life-threatening. And I saw in the chat too that someone mentioned that calling a special session to January. I don't know, Senator Francisco, if you have thoughts on that, but that was kind of one of my worries, is that August 2nd happens and then August 3rd, we're going to be back in the legislature voting on things.
Well, I wouldn't put it past them. Which is why it's really important to get as many people out as possible to vote who understand this issue. Someone mentioned reading the Turnaway studies, so that's Emily Reiner. I'll have to look at that. Okay, is there a bullet point handout that we can access? Has the league put one together, Seal, or?
Seal, go ahead and answer that.
Oh,
because you had
it
a
is
lot to do
answered.
with it.
Carol has
Yeah.
answered it in the chat. Okay.
Well, I want Seal to answer that anyway. I put up Kansans for Freedom because they have a good piece on their website. That's Kansans for Constitutional Freedom, but kansasforfreedom.com is their website. But I want Seal to answer that because she worked on several handouts, and then we have them available at all of our tabling events.
Right. The league finally put together this blue flyer, and it has at the bottom a QR code, which you probably can't, well, there might be.
Oh, I can see that. Okay.
Okay, and that goes to League of Women Voters of Kansas website, webpage that lists a lot of information about the abortion, the amendment. And it goes to both our partners, the Kansas for Constitutional Freedom, and it also lists a lot of other resources that talks about like the Guttmacher, is that how you say it? Institute that has a lot of research on who gets abortions and why, and a lot of other facts about abortion and those in Kansas, and all the restrictions in Kansas are already on the books and that have not been challenged in the 3 years since the Supreme Court ruling. So yes, we had a few thousands of these put out or printed up, and all the local leagues have at least a few of them. Lawrence has 1,200 of them. And so I hope we get them all passed out one way or the other before the election.
Carol, did you have something to add to that?
I just wanted to add, thank you, Marcy, for responding to the question about life begins at conception, with saying that this is one religious view, not all religious views, and whether or not one has a religion is not, and which one it is not dictated by the state. But I wanted to point out that it is most certainly not a part of the Jewish faith. And there are several synagogues that are working on vote no campaigns, just as there are a number of Catholic churches working on vote yes campaigns.
And I'm a member of the Unitarian Fellowship, who's looking to establish heaven on earth, and because we don't think we're going to get there otherwise. But we are also working. I was very proud that they sent out 1,000 postcards last week. And so there are groups of faith who have different perspectives. And I think it's important to respect all those perspectives. You know, no one is saying that you have to have an abortion. We have said that your tax dollars will not help anyone else have an abortion. So people can feel comfortable that their participation is not aiding something that they don't support. But isn't quite another thing to tell someone else. I think especially for men to tell women what limitations they should have. And so that was a good question. What are we, Representative Haswood, was that what you asked? What are we doing about men? My 100-year-old mother feels quite the same way. She says, what are you doing about men? And are we castrating anyone who's been the perpetrator of a rape?
I was expressing my frustrations because I don't see any policy. I don't think there's any policy restricting a man's bodily autonomy.
I was just going to add the language that flies around just shows how much medical ignorance there is regarding the whole process of reproduction, conception. Oh, you can just reimplant an ectopic pregnancy into the womb. What? No, you can't. What? I just incredible. That ties into the mansplaining around this whole issue, and just in general, not understanding the actual physical process, which once again is the result of opting out of sex ed in public school, limiting the sex education in public schools. So that's my little former school nurse rant.
So I, along with my husband, very much wanted a child, but we got married late in life. When I had a miscarriage, the healthcare that was suggested was dilation and extraction so that infection wouldn't start. But I think there's also a misunderstanding of how often women have miscarriages, what kind of healthcare should be available to them, and that their healthcare providers are there to protect their health. And if we make this such a difficult decision for not only a woman, but for all those healthcare providers to feel like they want to protect their ability to continue to have their license, to continue to help people.
Yeah, it really does have a chilling effect. Who wants to be an OBGYN? I mean, you know, previous to all of this wave of anti-doctor legislation or criminalizing medical care, it was, you know, it's a high-risk profession. The liability insurance for an OBGYN is much higher than other fields. So it will have a chilling effect on who chooses to go into that specialty.
And it will have a limitation on what they're able to learn and how helpful they can be when they're faced with an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't let people have training, if you don't let them understand what might be needed, then once again, we are not valuing them both. We are valuing an unborn child over a woman and over the other children she has in her family. Carol, you've got your hand back up again.
Yeah, I do. And I just have to go back to also saying, we are saying that the decision to reproduce is between a woman and her state legislature. Her mostly male Republican state legislature. So I have another question, if we have time for one. Give us some numbers that make us feel good, okay? I read that in Sedgwick County, they are, well, I have to grab for hope, right? I have it, but I can't have to keep grabbing. Sedgwick County, we understand that they are preparing for a greater than 60% turnout in the primary. What other numbers have you heard, or what other hopeful signs have you seen?
I can speak on my little internship. I have college students working with me this summer, and we're canvassing in my House district. And it's really great because that takes off the burden of Douglas County Dems and Kansas for Constitutional Freedom. Though what's different with my campaign is that we're really focusing on Democrats, on unaffiliated voters. I don't see any points on wasting resources on trying to convince people at the door. So we're just making sure that our fellow Democrats have answer any questions as much as we can. But we did a couple canvassing, and we're doing it every Saturday. And a lot of them were like, yeah, I'm gonna be voting no. I'm already registered to vote. I have a voting plan. So that was really hopeful for my district. And we have a lot of young folks. There's this really cute Twitter account called Vote Nay. And it's like cowboy theme with cow prints. And it's like some folks from Wichita, along with Loud Light. And they're making a whole cowgirl theme. It's kind of what the kids are doing these days. And selling merch and everything. And it's just really cute. And they're kind of reaching that mainstream media. I know Douglas County Dems has been canvassing Saturday and Sunday as well. And there's going to be, I think, a rally coming up too in July. And I think everyone in Lawrence is excited to vote no, which is really, really great. I always get a jump scare when I go to Johnson County and see their yard signs, value them both, because there's not a lot here in Lawrence. But then it makes me hopeful that, you know, we can take care of our community on that. But then it gets really challenging when we visit other counties.
I do know that there's a lot of activity in Sedgwick County. I'm going to be going to Wichita for the Council on State Governments. So I think I hardly ever turn on the TV in the hotel room, but I'm going to turn it on because I hear there's a very good physician in Wichita who's featured on an ad there. So trying to sort of get out the vote. And there was a very interesting opinion piece, I think in last Sunday's Kansas City Star, that talked about how the decision on Roe versus Wade looks to have really energized the opposition to this amendment. And he was saying, everywhere I look, I see a vote no sign or bumper sticker. So, and that it's hard to get one, right? The people that are providing those have run out of stickers. So there is some good news that this message is out. And I appreciate the league in their messaging, because this is just one of a stream of groups. Christina has mentioned younger women, and I was so excited at the turnout in South Park when they had the event, how many young faces and young voices we heard, because some of us could be relaxed and just say, oh, not my problem. But I really see this connection between older women who understand and may have, I mean, I remember the days before Roe versus Wade, connecting with younger women and saying their lives are just as important. This was a fabulous opportunity for us to have more freedom, and we want to make sure every other woman has that.
Thank
And I
you.
wanna
I would say one little piece of data that I have is that when I went to the post office to get more stamps for sending postcards, the person at the post office says, "Are you with those women that are sending postcards?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Well, we're just about out of postcard stamps."
So I bought some yesterday in Kansas City when I was visiting my mother, and I bought 600 in Pittsburgh when I went down for the Kansas Field Conference, because 2 weeks ago I had bought all the rest of what they had in downtown. So do you need any more, Carol?
Thanks, I have 100.
Oh, okay. And I love them to send to rural areas because they're barns.
And I wanted to touch on the young people age and how this was on the August ballot instead of November ballot, and that was very, very intentional. And the way I see it is that August, the students aren't back in town yet. They're probably on vacation, so their voting is the last thing on their mind. A lot of folks college students don't know that they could vote in Kansas if their parents live elsewhere. And I always explain it that when I was going to school at Arizona State, I spent majority of my year in Arizona, and I was paying state taxes for my job to Arizona. So that's why I chose to be a registered voter in Arizona instead of Kansas. And just trying to educate the young people on that, and advanced ballots. You know, we don't have the luxury here in Kansas to register day of voting day. There's certain time blocks for requesting an absent ballot, and knowing your polling location and put it in a drop box and all that. So it was very, very intentional to suppress the young people's vote on this. They're really backing and counting on their main core voters to come out. So that was probably one of the biggest things that was alarming to me. I also put in the chat, there's a YouTube channel called Kansas Politics. I don't have cable at my house, but I'm always on YouTube, and they have all the political ads. Some of them are goofy. So. And I don't have a sense of how many Dems and Republicans are registered. Was that for in Lawrence? Or just the state of Kansas?
Either.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
have
that's
that
a
number.
Jamie Shu question. But fun to know. I'll ask certainly in Wichita when I'm there, what they're thinking or what information they have about registration. But it's always good to get people registered to vote. It's always good to remind people that elections are important. So, you know, I'm gonna say I'm happy about that. You know, I had wanted to have another amendment on the ballot to get rid of the constitutional ban on marriage in Kansas because we don't need it anymore. And maybe that would get more people out, but it's always politics is always a pendulum. And I'm just hoping it keeps swinging a little farther to participation and respect.
Those are really excellent words to end on, unless you have more excellent words to say. I just want to thank both of our guests so much for spending time with us here today. It was a great discussion. This video will be available on our YouTube channel. So if you know somebody who said, oh, darn, I couldn't be there today, tell them go to lawrenceleague.com and it will be posted on our website. And July 12th, deadline to register. Check your registration. Make sure your friends and family are registered. And advanced voting starts July 13th. So go do it early. And that's all I have to say about that. Thanks everyone so much. And August, join us. We will have an update on the League of Women Voters US convention. So all the news from that gathering, and there's some exciting news from there. Join us. I think we will do that on the actual third Thursday that month. That's August 18th. So pencil that in. And thanks again so much all for being here.
Thanks to the League members. It's so appreciated. Thanks to Representative Haswood. We need her voice in the legislature, and I am so pleased she's there.
Yes. Thank you both. Thanks, everyone.
Bye all.